Hey everyone, today I'm going to be doing a video about this rifle you see right in front of you, which is an AK47 from Kalashnicohn. Now, those of you who've been following my channel for a while may remember about a year or two ago I did a video with my friend Randy about another rifle from Kalashnicohn, and back then and to this day I will still say that that was by far the nicest AK I had ever handled, period, dot, end of story. Everything about it was smooth, the craftsmanship was excellent, the fit and finish was excellent, just it was an all-around amazing rifle, so I gave it a glowing review because it deserved it. I also think it's worth mentioning that that rifle was sent to my friend Randy without any idea that it was going to be used in any sort of video online. So for that reason, I felt that it was an accurate representation of the type of quality you can expect ordering a rifle from Kalashnicohn. So with that glowing recommendation, one of my patrons went out and purchased one of these rifles, and this happens to be the exact one that he purchased. And he got in touch with me and said, hey, if you ever want to review another Kalashnicohn rifle, let me know. I'll send this one out to you, and you can roll in front of the camera, and you can let people know what you think about it. So I gladly accepted, and I had him send one out to me because actually at the time I was in the process of speaking with Jeremiah over there at Kalashnicohn and trying to organize him building a rifle for myself so that I could personally own one of his rifles. However, as soon as I pulled my patron's rifle out of the box, I knew immediately that it was not built to the same standard that the first rifle I tested was. And because of that, I am really kind of disappointed bringing this video to you. I did not want to do this video, but I felt basically an obligation to you, my viewers, because I did the video on the previous one and gave it such a glowing review. I needed to update you on my current opinions on these rifles from Kalashnicohn. Now that said, this is obviously just a sample of one. However, based on my interactions with Kalashnicohn and some of the other things going on, I feel that it may be indicative of the current quality. However, I hope will not be indicative of any future quality from Jeremiah. So even before I got a hold of this rifle, the person who purchased it requested a rifle exactly like the one that I originally reviewed, which looked very much like this one does now. However, when it first arrived to him, it came with a completely different finish on it. It was almost a silver finish on the rifle, which, while not a bad finish job, was not what this person requested. So he sent it to Kalashnicohn to get that squared away, and then when it returned to him, it almost had what I would describe as a parkerized finish. It was more closer to the color, but it was definitely not the finish that was on the original rifle or the one that you would see on this rifle now. However, the person was happy with it, so they took the rifle and then, again, eventually sent it on to me. Now, one of the things that I was most impressed about with that first rifle I tested was the smoothness of the bolt. Those of you who are familiar with AKs know that it's very common, even on really high-end AKs, for when you cycle the bolt, if you kind of lock it back, the bolt will kind of stick in the rearward position. On that first rifle, I could not, no matter how hard I tried, get that bolt to lock back. And even after shooting, it got even more smooth, which I thought was hard to believe. However, when I took this out of the box the first time, I pulled back on the little charging handle, and it locked back. Now it has smoothed out since then, but as you saw, I was able to, with very little effort, get it to lock back. Again, as I mentioned, that is not an uncommon thing to find, but it was not indicative of the quality that I had seen on the first rifle. Now, as I was continuing to handle the rifle, as my background check was going through, I noticed also that the gas tube up here, you can probably hear it, was loose and wiggling around. I've looked around at this little lever here, the little detent that locks it into place, and no matter what I did, this thing, even now, is still loose. Which, again, not a deal breaker by any means whatsoever, but again, not indicative of the quality I'd seen before. So right off the bat, I was kind of surprised by the build quality of this, and actually one of the more, I guess, revealing things about it, it was right here on the mag weld dimple. You'll see that what I assume is the attempts to weld the rails in place inside the receiver here. Either it was left too long in one place or it was misplaced, but it pushed material into this mag weld dimple. which at first I didn't think much of. However, when I got home and I started to do magazine fitments tests, I started noticing a bad trend, and that was specifically polymer magazines such as Magpul or Tapco magazines. About 50% of the time would not even fit inside the mag well, let alone lock into place, would not physically fit into the mag well. Now, is that because this thing got pressed too tightly together? I don't know, but regardless, that was an issue I found. Now, I know some of you will say, well, just don't use polymer magazines. You should be using steel magazines anyway. Hey, more power to you. However, in today's day and age, those surplus steel magazines are not as cheap as they used to be, and all the cheap ones are of questionable quality. I'll say that simply. So a lot of my friends that I know who run AKs, including myself, really likes things like those Magpul magazines for use in at least a training environment, so we don't have to worry about getting our go-to mags all dirty or messed up or dinged up or affecting their function in any way whatsoever. So I was really disappointed to see that. And then one thing I noticed while I was shooting it, I was doing some very simple shooting drills, and I noticed that when I went to go sweep the safety up into place without any sort of intent to overextend the safety, when just popping it into place, the safety would overextend and go up above the dust cover. And so for those of you who are familiar with rifles like the Yugo AKs, if you have a full auto safety with a comm block trigger and you overextend that safety, it will actually drop the hammer. So if you have a round in the chamber and you go to actuate your safety and put it in place and it accidentally goes up, you can discharge a round unintentionally. And I've actually seen that happen before in a class. Now that wouldn't be a bad thing, except you have a full auto safety in this, which means, listen carefully, drops the hammer if you extend that safety too far up. Now, again, you might say, well, just don't overextend it. However, if you say that, I'm gonna assume you've probably never been in a stressful training environment, because that happens pretty frequently unless there's something that gets in the way. Like on my Arsenal AK47, the dust cover has a little lip, which this one does now, to prevent that safety from being able to overextend and possibly discharge a round. So that has since been fixed. I'll kind of get more into that in a minute, but that was another issue I found. Again, none of these things are necessarily deal breakers. However, things that were not indicative of the quality that I saw in the first rifle. So after I started noticing these issues, I got in contact with Jeremiah and I let him know what was up. And again, at this point in time, I was in discussions with him about him building me a rifle in 5.45 so that I could finally have an AK-74. And our interactions started out very cordial and polite because I'd met him before. However, when I started raising issue after issue, things started deteriorating drastically to the point where he said, well, you don't know what you're talking about because you're not an AK guy, which, whatever you think of my knowledge of AK-47s, regardless of the fact that I have thousands of rounds through AKs and have run AKs in several classes, regardless of all that, that is not a response that I was hoping for in that situation. So I was pretty disappointed with that, and was trying to decide what I should do. Like, should I just send the rifle back to my patron? Should I continue testing it? Should I put a video out? And I thought about it for a long time and finally decided, you know what, I need to let you guys know what my current opinions are. So I finally got Jeremiah to be willing to take the rifle back. So I sent the rifle back, which is a story in of itself. I'm just gonna save time by saying it took a lot longer to get this rifle back than I was anticipating. And I had to pay to ship it down there. But once I got the rifle back and I gave him the list of issues that I was having with it, it came back and has the correct finish on it. Will fit all of my magazines, to include polymer mags, and I'm going to demonstrate that here in a second, and had a different dust cover so that it would not let the safety overextend. Still, as you can see now, has the loose gas tube. Again, not necessarily a problem, but not an issue you should have, in my opinion. But let me go ahead and just grab some of those mags so I can show you the fitment of it now. First up, I have one of the Bulgarian Circle 10 polymer with steel reinforced mags, kind of the gold standard of AK mags right now. Fits in, no problem. And all these magazines are going to be empty. I have found, at least with one or two of the mags, if you have a fully loaded magazine, It takes a little bit more effort, but I think that's more of a mag thing than the rifle thing. This is a Croatian steel magazine. Locks into place no problem. All of them have a little bit of wobble, but that's never an issue in my opinion on AKs. Here we have a slab-sided Tapco mag, and locks into place. Nope. All right, I had to change memory cards there. Now we have a Magpul mag. This is one of the non-steel ones, one of the Gen 1s. Locks into place, no problem. We have I think this is a Yugoslavian steel surplus mag. Locks into place, and oh, safety's on, LOL. Locks into place, and the bolt hold open feature works. And then another just generic steel surplus mag. Not sure where it's from, but this one locks into place no problem. And all of these magazines seem to function pretty well also. So that problem is gone. The problem with the safety wanting to overextend is gone. The problem with the finish is gone. Everything I thought was good to go. That wasn't until yesterday when I finally finally convinced myself to take this thing out to the range and shoot it after getting it back again. After it got back, I was just so kind of over this rifle that I couldn't bring myself to take it out and see if all this stuff was fixed on it. However, because this does need to go back to my patron, I finally did it. And so yesterday I took it out, shot it, shot great. However, I noticed something different about this rifle, which is there is no detent for the safety to secure itself in the fire position. Now, that may not sound like an issue. However, the issue we ran into was when we had the gun on fire, so i.e. the safety all the way down, pressed against the little stopper here in front of the trigger guard. It stayed there at first. However, shooting magazine after magazine, I think in total we put about 90 rounds through it without ever touching the safety started working its way up and up and up until the point we had a failure to fire, which I think was ammo related. It was cheap Tula ammo, something I've experienced across all my AKs from Tula ammo. So when I went to press the trigger, I noticed something that felt kind of weird. So I'll try to replicate that now. Okay, so I felt a weird feeling as I cycled that trigger. I knew it was empty, but I kept feeling it because it almost felt like it was releasing the sear, but I knew that the hammer was in the fired position. So I couldn't figure out what that little piece of resistance was that felt like the sear breaking. Turns out the safety had ridden up to the point where it was actually impeding on the trigger. Had it gone up any further, it would have actually prevented me from being able to pull the trigger. That is not something I want on a rifle that I'm using to defend myself or my family. You might say, well, you're probably not going to be shooting that many rounds at one time without actuating the safety. Hey, maybe you're right. However, I want to be prepared for the worst case scenario with a gun I'm using to defend myself or my family. So the fact that the safety can on its own start working its way up is in my opinion, a deal breaker. And I actually went ahead and recorded just before coming out here, shooting this thing, shooting about 20 rounds and showing how that safety moved under recoil up at that point, maybe less than 1/4 of an inch. But again, yesterday, over time, magazine after magazine, worked its way up to where it was starting to impede on that trigger. And if it had gone any further, would have stopped being able to press that trigger to the rear. Again, not a good thing in my opinion. And I'm not sure what receivers he's using. I know the first one I think was a Morrissey receiver. So I don't know if these are his own proprietary thing, but the big thing is it does not have a little slot for that safety to lock into in the fire position like my Arsenal does, like my M92 used to have. I say used to have because I've gotten rid of that gun. It's not that it doesn't have it anymore. And pretty much any other AK that I've ever come across has those little notches to prevent something like that from happening. Safety is all the way down against the buffer. And as you can see, it has risen up over the course of that magazine. So with all that said, again, it's not a bad rifle in its own right. Yeah, it has little quirks here and there. A lot of the stuff was fixed by Jeremiah once he finally took it back. And again, it's been mostly reliable with the exception of that little safety issue. However, I would say it's not a bad gun when you compare it to other guns in the price range that I thought this came in at. However, when I asked my patron how much he paid for it, he said he paid $950 for this rifle. Which, for those of you not super familiar with the AK industry, at $950, you're putting it up against things like Arsenal SLR 107s. And I think, based on this sample of one, I would rather have one of those Arsenals. And again, for that matter, I checked Atlantic Firearms before coming out here. You can get a Wasser 10 for under $700, which is at $250 less than this, means you can buy one of those Wasser 10s and a case of ammo and some extra mags for the price of this, and probably have a rifle that you're not going to have to worry about. If you've seen AK Operators Union's tests of those Wasser 10s, those things just take a beating and keep on chugging. Again, I think this would take a beating and keep on chugging, but it's got little things that shouldn't be there on a rifle, especially one in this price range. Now, again, I want to make it very clear. I know that Jeremiah has the ability to make a very, very high quality rifle. Again, the first rifle I tested from him was of an exceptional quality and one that I would never hesitate to recommend to anyone or use in defense of my own life. I know he had a lot of stuff going on in his life around the time that he built this thing, so you know, maybe that was the reason that some things just got overlooked on this and some of the just refinement things were just kind of left off this rifle. And I'm confident that he has the ability to make really high quality rifles again. However, at this point in time, based off my experience with this rifle and my experience with kind of the customer service end, I just cannot in good conscience tell you to spend $950 on a rifle like this over buying a Wasser 10, an Arsenal, or some of the other Comblock kit rifles that you can purchase elsewhere at a lower price. So again, I really I don't like doing the negative reviews like this. I don't like bringing things in front of the camera that I don't recommend. But hopefully this lights a fire under Jeremiah to hopefully increase the quality back to what I know he's capable of, because I think that that is something that is very much needed here in the US, is those quality, you know, semi-custom AK builders that can make a very quality product to bring more people into the AK community. So hopefully next time you see a Kalashnicohn AK on my channel, it'll be under much more positive circumstances. But again, it's just really, really unfortunate that I have to say about this the things that I did. So if you are of the same opinion that I just am not an AK guy, so I don't know what I'm talking about, feel free to let me know in the comments. I know that AKs are supposed to be beater guns and they're not supposed to be super refined. However, the way the market's going, I think is counter to that, and there's some really nice rifles coming out right now. So if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, go ahead and let me know down in the comment section down below. I'll try to get back to you as quick as I can. If you're wondering what AKs I would recommend, I would say watch AK Operators Union, see how the rifles he tests do, and you know, based off that, because putting 5,000 rounds through a gun is going to be a much better test than, I don't know, the few hundred rounds that I put through this thing. I just honestly didn't want to spend more ammo to put through this thing to see how it did under higher round counts. I just couldn't bring myself to do it. I will be hopefully getting an AK-74 here on the channel very, very soon, at which point I'm going to be doing some testing on that, so definitely stay tuned for that. I'm going to be doing everything like headspace gauge testing and all that, so definitely be on the lookout for those videos when they come out. So Jeremiah, if you're watching this, I know what you can do, and I really hope to see that here soon. But for the time being, I'm sorry, man. I just got to let people know what my honest opinion is. So with that, as always, I hope you're able to get something out of this video, and I really appreciate you watching.
At least the wood on this isn't. Yep.
Yeah, other than that part, yeah. Just loose.
Yeah.